So I wanted to kind of like do this one a little bit different and talk about some of the ghost stories that I've heard throughout my life from people that I know. The first ghost story that I remember hearing about when I was a little kid, I was, when I was growing up, my mom was friends with this woman. I have trouble remembering her name. I think it was like Kathy or something. But she had a son who was around my age at the time. Like, I was a little kid. His name was like Jordy. And I remember my mother had told me about like sometime later, like that her friend they were living in a haunted house or something. And I was like, oh, well, can you tell me? And she eventually told me what happened. She said that Jordy had, he had an older sister, but they were living in this house, and that Jordy claims that this, he was getting scratched and he was getting slapped in his room. And apparently, I guess, his older sister had also experienced something happening in this room too. And from what I understand, the mother was kind of like, she didn't really believe them. She didn't really think anything was really going on. She just kind of assumed that, they were maybe making it up or something. But I guess it happened again, and this time it was really bad. And he had told her, like, he'd gotten slapped, and he was like, kind of freaking out. And the mother had been like, yeah, well, she, again, kind of put it off. But there was something that happened that was sort of like the thing that, put her over the edge to believing. From what I understand, my mom told me that she had gone into the room to clean one day, and she had sat down on the bed, and she was sitting there, and I think my mom said she might have fallen asleep, or she was kind of feeling tired, and all of a sudden she felt this massive slap on her back, and she was like, whoa, and she jumped out of bed, ran. I guess she had this big red mark on her back, and it was the moment, that was kind of like the moment she realized that there was something wrong with this room, that there was something in this room. And from that point on, I guess they boarded up the door, and nobody was allowed to go into that room. And from what I remember, my mom told me, was that sometime after that, they actually moved out of that house. And I don't really know much beyond that, because my mom kind of like lost touch with this woman, and I didn't really talk to Jordy that much. Like, usually when she came over, she would bring him and we would hang out and stuff, but I didn't really talk to him after that. And from what I understand, she passed away a few years ago or something, but I haven't really kept in touch. The next story I want to talk about is something that happened to my cousins. Doug and Mandy and their mother, Patty and Greg, I was really close with my cousin Doug. He was a lot like me, and he didn't really have an interest in the paranormal or anything, but he was a lot like me, but like he was jokey and stuff. And I had heard that they had moved into this house, that something strange was going on there. The thing about it is, this Greg, my uncle Greg, was sort of just one of these guys that liked to move all the time. He liked to live in a different house all the time. So they were constantly moving from like one house to another. But they ended up living in this place called Bowmanville, Ontario. And I've only been there a couple times, but this place, Bowmanville, they had this house that was near a school, I guess. And what I heard was that, and the weird thing is, like, I talked to Doug and Mandy, my cousins, since then, and I've asked them about it, and they're always kind of evasive about it. They're kind of vague when they tell me. Like, I always kind of like want to know, but they just, there's something there, they don't really want to talk about it. But from what I understand, it all centered kind of around this bathroom that was upstairs. And Doug told me that there had been strange things going on in this house. But Doug said that he had come home from school, And he was upstairs in the bathroom, and there was nobody home that he knew about. So there's nobody there. He went into the bathroom to do his business, and he said that he had heard what sounded like voices right outside the bathroom door. And it was like he heard them clear as day. It was like they were literally standing outside the bathroom door, and they were saying, "Oh, is he home? Yeah, he's home. Yeah, he's home. He just got home." And Doug heard these voices, and he was like, "Oh, that's weird. There's voices outside," but he thought, they don't sound like my parents, but it has to be them. So he assumed that it was them, and they had just come home. And so he finished up, and he opened the door, and there was nobody in the hall. So he thought, that's kind of weird. Anyways, he had gone around and checked, and there was nobody downstairs. And he went upstairs. He said he looked out the window, and he looked down, and there was no car in the driveway. But he was certain that there was people standing outside the bathroom door. He heard them clear as day. So he thought, there was something really weird going on here. And then I guess they had other things that happened, but the big one, the one that kind of caused them to want to move out, or they eventually did move out of it. But the one that kind of like freaked them out the most was when Mandy had gone into the bathroom one night. I guess she was taking a long time, and Doug and Patty, which was my aunt, they were kind of like, what's going on? Why is she in the bathroom so long? So they eventually knocked, and there was no answer. So they thought, okay, something's going on. So they eventually kind of just walked in, Patty walked in, and from what they told me, and this part's really odd because I don't really know the full details because they won't really go into it. But from what I understand, okay, so Mandy was completely passed out, and she was levitating above the toilet, and Doug said that there were these black things, misty things, floating around her, and she was levitating above the toilet. And he said that it was the strangest, creepiest thing they've ever seen. And then eventually she came to, and she had no idea what happened. She didn't remember any of it. She was just frightened. And it was that point that they, from what I understand, they ended up moving out of that house. But like I said, I've asked them, I've run into them at funerals and stuff, because they completely moved away. They live in another part of Ontario. So I don't really see them very often. But from when I talk to them, they're always really evasive about it. They don't want to talk about it, but it's like, yeah, this happened, but we don't want to talk about it. So it's always like pulling teeth, even with Doug. And he's pretty laid back, but it's really hard to get him to talk about it. It's always just kind of vague stuff. But anyways, the next story I want to talk about is a guy I used to go hiking with. There was a guy I worked with at Sears. His name was Steve. He was kind of a nerdy looking guy. He had the glasses and everything, but he wasn't he wasn't really a nerd. So he kind of looked like it, but he wasn't. But he kind of looked like Steve Mnuchin, but not. But he wasn't a nerdy kind of guy like Steve is. So anyways, what happened was we used to go hiking up at this area in Ontario. It's a park. So we used to go up there and hike. Every Saturday, we would go up in the morning on a Saturday morning, and we would hike this trail that was 3 hours long. So he had experienced some ghosts in his when he was younger. But he was a hardcore skeptic. He didn't believe in any of it. Thought it was all crap. He didn't want to talk about the paranormal. So but whenever we would go hiking, I don't not every time, but at least once a month, I would try to oh, you got to tell me your ghost story. You got to tell me your ghost story. So he told me this story so many times that he got sick of it. But from what he told me is that they lived in this house that was literally right next to a graveyard. It was a really big graveyard. He was living in this house with his sister and his parents. He was really young. I think he was 12, 13, 14 years old kind of thing. He was young. And he said that he had had 3 experiences with these I guess you call them ghosts. The main one was that he would wake up, he said, and he would see this little boy standing at the end of his bed, and the little boy would look at him and kind of just like fade out. And he said the boy was kind of like see-through, but also a kind of like a bluish color, like a hazy blue or something. He said one night he woke up and the boy was standing there looking at him, and he kind of like freaked, and he jumped out of bed and he chased the kid. He chased after the kid, and he said that the kid ran behind his dresser, which was up against the wall. He said that he ran up to the dresser and like he was like certain that this kid had gone behind the dresser. And so Steve said, like, I pulled the dresser right out from the wall, and I was looking for like anything, like a trap door or something, just because I was certain that this kid had gone behind this dresser. So that was the one. And then there was another one that for him, it was the most it was the scariest thing that ever happened. It was the one that terrified him the most. It was when he woke up, and he woke up to a gurgling sound and somebody beating on his chest. He told me that it was a pounding on his chest. He woke up and he heard like a gurgling sound, and it was loud, and he was laying down on his bed on his back. He looked over on the bed. Right beside him there was an old lady who was laying on her back, and she was choking on something or gurgling, and she was looking at him and pounding like with her right hand, I guess, was holding her throat, and her left hand, and she was laying on his right side, and she was pounding on him with her left hand on his chest and staring at him. And he was like, he told me he woke up, he looked over, he felt it, and he heard it, and he saw this woman, and he said that he completely freaked out. He like bolted out of bed. He turned around, turned lights on, turned around, and there was nobody there. But he said I clearly saw this, and I felt it and heard it. So that was the one that really, really terrified him. And the third thing he saw, he said there was other things, but he never really went into them. But the third thing he saw was something that it was actually experienced by him and his sister at the same time. The thing is that he said he woke up one night in bed, and there was a German Shepherd's dog standing. His door was open. He said there was a German Shepherd dog standing in his doorway, and he looked over at the dog, and the dog looked over at him. And so Steve thought that a dog had gotten in the house somehow, like maybe the door was open or something. So he jumped out of bed, because they didn't own a dog. He jumped out of bed, he said, and this dog looked at him and kind of like, he said it turned around and walked out into the hallway. And he said they had hardwood floors, and he said you could clearly hear the clacking of its paw, its nails on the floor. So he said he walked out into the hallway, and the dog was walking down the hall, I guess past where his sister's room was. The dog was walking down the hall. It looked back at him, and then he said it kept walking a little bit, and then it faded out. Well, he said that his sister at that point opened her door, and she asked what that was, because she heard the clacking from the paw, the nails on the hardwood. So she heard this thing that he was looking at. So, I mean, that was a shared experience with this, ghost dog or something. But yeah, those are the three stories he told me. The old lady in the bed was the one that absolutely, terrified him. The little boy, he said, didn't really scare him. It just was weird. And then the dog was just really weird, but it didn't really scare him. But those are the three. The last one I want to talk about is Sears. I used to work at Sears. Everyone knows that. I've told that many times. And I used to work with a security guard up in this area. It was like a secure area, and it was like a mail area. So I would sit we wouldn't sit. I would be working with her. And she was really cool. She was really open to all kinds of stuff, talking about stuff. And we talked about the paranormal quite often. And she told me, because I'd heard working at Sears that there was a lot of weird stuff going on at the factory. And like, I wanted to know if like it was true. Like, I'd heard from people that maintenance men and stuff had seen these legs walking around, like these pair of legs or whatever, these legs without a body, without a top half. It was like a torso or something, just kind of like walking around. And people had seen this thing in this area in the back of the Sears area, and which they had turned into a mail area, but at first it was just like a warehouse, like big long aisles that are like really dark and creepy. You know, if you've ever seen the X-Files episode where he's walking in that warehouse and he's putting the extraterrestrial items away in I guess it was supposed to be like Area 51 or something, some kind of like top secret warehouse. It was kind of like that. That's how the back of this place looked. And that's where people would see these legs like walking around without a top half. So anyways, I'd asked her and she confirmed, yeah, like people were seeing these things. And I said, did you ever have any experiences? And she said, yeah. She said, like, everyone did. Like, all the security guards had seen things and experienced things. She told me the one that she always remembered was that there would be, like, nobody there at, 2 and 3 when they would do their rounds. She told me that, one night she had gone out and she was doing her rounds, and she said I could hear, like, when you were there is like a 3 level and you could hear people walking around on the level above. She said I could hear somebody walking up there clear as day, and it was like I went up and there was nobody there, and I was checking with the security guys at the cameras and there's nobody there. She's like, there's somebody walking around up here. So she told me that story, and she said it really creeped her out. And she said there was a couple of young guys that were working security. I think they were like, kind of like just at a loss or whatever. And they were like, that's like a lawn security program. And they were just at a loss, and they were like working there. And they had this experience, she told me, where they had seen a broom, like on the security camera. This was late at night when most people had gone home. They seen a broom in the middle of this like section, like this area where people picked mail. They seen it standing straight up, like on the bristles and standing straight up, and like so the wooden handle part would be facing towards the ceiling, and it was just sort of like positioned there, which was kind of like impossible. Brooms don't generally stand straight up unless something's holding them. So apparently these 2 security guards had seen this on this camera. They got weirded out by it, and they'd gone out to check it. From what I understand, like, she told me that as they were pulling up to the section in their little golf cart that they used to drive around the factory with, as they were pulling up to it, the broom flopped over. So there was that. I think she told me one time that there was an incident where they would get, late at night, they had like the front desk that they would man, and then at night, like, you'd have, every once in a while they, people would come into the factory, delivery men and stuff, and they would have to, she said like one night there was a guy that came in, and they heard him, and he'd rung the bell, so they had gone out, and spoke with him, and then they said when they went back in, there was nobody there, and there was nobody on the camera. It was like the strangest thing. It was just like the guy had vanished. And then there was one more that she told me that was really strange. There's a guy that used to be an RCMP officer who worked at Sears as a security guard. He was like retired or something. He was getting up there, and he had an experience that was really strange too, and he was like straight-laced, didn't believe in that. And she told me that he had been, so what they did was they do their rounds at night. They would drive around in a golf cart all night and check the different areas, and then go up the stairs and check. So they just kind of like checked the factory out, see if anyone was there. Well, one night he was doing his rounds, and it was really late at night, like 2 or 3. And he drove by, like there was little offices and stuff. And he drove by one of the offices, and there was a guy standing in there. And he was certain that there was a guy that worked at Sears named Larry, and I knew the guy, everyone knew the guy, but he was certain that he was standing in this room, and he was pretty sure that it was Larry. So he stopped and he's like, what is Larry doing here at 3 o'clock in the morning? Nobody's supposed to be here. So he'd gone in and checked, and there was nobody there. There's nobody on the footage or nothing on the camera. So he didn't know what was going on, because he was certain that he was looking at this guy, Larry. And I've heard of stories about, ghosts taking on the form of people, like a mimic, or I don't know what the word is for. The word is when they kind of like take the form of a person. It's not like a doppelganger, but it's the same idea. But anyways, I don't know. I thought that I would do something a little different. Last week's episode was kind of like really scripted, so I wanted to kind of just have like a laid back episode and talk about ghost stories. I haven't seen a ghost. I've experienced like knocking. We've had these weird things where people knock on the door, and like things like that, but I haven't really had any real ghost stories. So I wanted to share some of the ones that were told to me over the years. Probably not that interesting to other people. They were to me. But anyways, next week I'll go back to the regular format, I guess. But anyways, thanks for listening. Catch you later.